many students struggle with their studies or even drop out. And it's really unfortunate because they drop out not because they are not able or not willing, but because one, they don't know how to use a textbook, or two, they don't know what amount of work qualifies as effort. And I'm going to explain both concepts in this video now, using these three textbooks. This one is a grade 9 math textbook, an apprenticeship textbook, and a textbook from engineering studies. Okay. Now, and this is particularly to you who grew up in the West. A textbook is not a burger commercial that you can ignore at your convenience and not read. In a textbook, you can actually, and you actually should read every single letter on every single page. That's how a textbook is designed, whether it's a textbook in math or physics or any sciences, history or grammar. All of these textbooks work the same way. You have to read every single letter on every single page. And I certainly understand that many people successfully developed a goldfish brain, which works by not reading anything and ignoring printed messages. Maybe read the biggest letters on the side of the bus or something like that. It's not gonna cut it when it comes to textbooks. Okay? In a textbook, you read every single letter on every single page. I have chosen these textbooks, even though they span a wide range of academic performance, from grade 9 to engineering, for a reason, and that reason is they work the same way and they are to be read and used the same way. Let me demonstrate it with this grade 9 textbook here. And this is on math. Also, another point that I'm making is good study habits actually start at grade 9. So if you find yourself struggling in grade 10 or in apprenticeship or in your engineering studies, it's never too late, okay, to catch up. But for all of you parents, good study habits and how to use a textbook actually starts around grade 8, grade 9 level. Okay, something along those lines. So, in a textbook, you have typically a table of contents. Come on in closer so you can see what's happening here. Table of contents. And in a table of contents, you can see chapters. And in the chapters, you can see individual lessons. This one has 4 lessons there, 4 lessons there, and maybe 3 lessons there. Okay, that's table of contents. So you know what the book is about, what it covers specifically, and what it doesn't. Okay, after the table of contents, you usually have a few pages devoted to how to interpret the visual clues in the textbook. Okay, what the authors mean by the concept of a math link, what the authors mean about what they mean by explore, and what the authors mean about vocabulary and keywords being highlighted in purple. Just come on in closer, like so. Center of rotation or rotation symmetry, and it explains how the visual clues are arranged in a textbook. Okay? Like I said, read it. And after these introductory pages, you come to the first chapter. In the first chapter, typically, there is a problem posed that's introducing the thinking the chapter is devoted to. Okay? So, don't skip these parts, because if you skip these parts, you are missing out on connecting the contents of the chapter to real life. Okay, so don't be asking 226 pages into the textbook, oh, how is this going to be useful? You have to read, like I said, these chapter introductions as well, because these will introduce you or the learner to lifelike or a life scenario, how the content is to be used in this chapter. And in this chapter we have here, this is one of my favorite features here, keywords. Keywords or learning outcomes. Sometimes you have both, and these keywords is particularly useful because it highlights the new terms that learners need to learn, and by that I mean memorize and quote at sight. Okay? And definitions of these keywords will be found within the chapter. Next one, this literacy link. That's what it's called, and but in other textbooks it's called, a similar idea can be found with similar related names. What this literacy link is, the purpose of it is to build connections between separate concepts in your brain. In your brain, information is stored, but to make your thinking more efficient, you need to wire those neurons in distinct areas of the brain somehow together. And that's what the purpose of these linking little sections in these chapters are. Okay, these build bridges, mental bridges in your brain. Next one is in this textbook. I really like this one. It's about a foldable. Make a foldable. Now, whatever the foldable is, you can read the instructions on it. It might look cheesy or corny or whatever food item you actually despise. You pick your own word of preference. However, there is a point in this foldable. The point is that you record on it new terms and new concepts with their definitions, and while you work with it with your hands and with your eyes and with your mind, copying information, you are interacting with the content. And when you're interacting with the content, the new content, that's when learning is taking place. Okay, so if you think, oh, I can save 20 minutes by not doing this foldable, yes, you can save 20 minutes of learning, and you also will be missing 20 minutes of learning. You also will be missing a level of understanding that you will not have by the time you get to chapter 7. Okay, so this foldable is important, and that's the purpose of it. Here is another math link, the first one right away, something to do with dragonflies and symmetry. There's your first keyword or new term, and it's highlighted in purple in this book and is explained and defined there. And there's a couple of exercises here listed below that make your brain work with the new concept of symmetry as it is defined here. Next one, the chapter begins here with this lesson, and in this lesson here on this side you can see learning outcomes. It doesn't say learning outcomes, it says focus on. However, these are the learning outcomes. So just in case you get lost with the pictures of whatever that is, and wow, nice building, dude. Alrighty, get back here and stay on track. This is what the learning outcomes, or this focus on little margin here is about. You can also find on the margin here another new keyword or term and its definition, or 1, 2, 3, 4 bullet points, and throughout the chapter the new term here is highlighted there and there. Wherever you work with it, it's highlighted, so you can look it up here where it is clearly defined on the margins here. Whenever you get stuck in the text, what was that about? You can look it up here on the side here. Okay, so the textbook here starts with another practical problem that relates to this image, and you get started with working and doing something actually physically with your hands. Here is exercise, just wait for the camera, 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually something that you do with your hands with your mind while you do these exercises and working with the new term, the definition of which again can be found here, just in case you get lost. After that, it says reflect and check. Additional exercises that are not so visual anymore, not as visual as these ones here, but therefore they maybe represent a higher level of difficulty because there is no visual clues with it. In these exercises, your brain is forced to work with a new concept without visual memory joggers. And again, to take the idea further, here is another link the idea, a little inset in the book here. After that, you can find a sample calculation on the concept of line symmetry here, because that's the new term here. And the sample calculation is broken down into A, B, C, and D here. And when at the end of it, you have an exercise here that you can do right away. It says show you know, that you can do with the new term, with the new concept, line symmetry. And if you can't do these, no worries, just review these steps in sample calculation 1. And then on in the book you have sample calculation 2. Okay, it's not really a calculation, but just work with me here. And you have steps in it. Steps are clearly demonstrated one at a time, and at the end of it you have one more exercise that you can do with the concept, with the second set of sample calculations. Just in case you got lost in the book, what do you have next? Key ideas, review right away. You had 2 sample calculations, you had 1 new term in it, and it's being reviewed to make sure that these learning outcomes here, not there, sorry, other page, that the learning outcomes here 2 pages back were actually met, and to help you not carried away with sunflowers or dragonflies or whatever, but to help you stay focused and stay on track. And this is where the actual practice problems start. And they are neatly numbered there, 1, 2, on the other side 3. In this book there is a 4-tier level of difficulty. This was the first one, named communicate the ideas. Next one is practice, so you have a bunch of exercises there on the practice. The next batch is harder, and they are under the title apply. And if you notice, it was about line symmetry, so you can see all kinds of geometric shapes with line symmetry, but in apply, all of a sudden you have something here, an item here that needs to be done in a coordinate system. And nowhere in the lesson was ever any word about coordinates and Cartesian planes and anything, and that's why it's in the next higher level of thinking, because you need some underlying background knowledge. You need to remember back something from your earlier studies to get this batch of practice problems done. That's why they are the next tier, the third one. They're harder. I've just recently spoken to a math teacher and said, who said to get your kid up to 100% from 83%, try to do 2 or 3 of these problems in the apply section. Well, that was nice advice to the parent, and basically that's a good idea. However, remember, like I said, you need to read every single page and every single letter on every book, and that or in the book, and that means that you're not done here. You're not done here. You have to do every single practice problem in your book. So keep working through the apply section and through those as well. So now all of a sudden we have geometry. With geometry we also have geography introduced. Here is a linking idea there. Just come on in a little closer. And this one says something about geography and something about ratio and proportion, and there is numbers. There was no ratio and proportion ever mentioned in this chapter in the sample calculation that was demonstrated, or was not linked to the new term that was introduced in this chapter. However, this is in the this is with a sign that shows it's building links between different areas of math or different areas in science. So this is now connecting ratio and proportion with another detail in geography. So you keep working through all of those practice problems, and then you get to the hardest ones, and the hardest ones are under the title Extend, or subtitle Extend. There's another literacy link there that works the same way, and one more math link. You're not done until you do all the practice problems in the Extend section. The difficulty here is gradually increasing. So here you have a shape on a coordinate system, and there are no actual coordinates given. There's just letters given. Okay. Here you have coordinates given with negative integers, alrighty, and no visual on the coordinate system at all. Okay, so you're gonna either need to draw it or imagine it, or just work with the numbers as is. That's what I mean, and that's what the authors had in mind. That's why this problem 20 here in the Extend batch, in the hardest batch of practice problems, because they need even more underlying background knowledge that you need to remember back or look it up, but you're not done until you get to practice problem 24 and it's solved. Okay? Now, in class, your teacher may have time to cover these ones here, the easy ones, 1, 2, 3, a couple of the practice ones, and that's that. That's when the math class is over. That's okay for a math class, but learning doesn't happen in a math class. Learning happens when you go home and sit down and interact with the material. And for the interaction, you have to do all of the practice problems. And to do all the practice problems, you have to read every single letter on every single page. Okay? That's an essential difference between a burger commercial that you can ignore and a textbook. And the amount of work that qualifies as an effort is not over yet, because you just work your way down to practice problem 24 and you solved it. But you're not done yet. What you do now is you repeat all of these calculations with different numbers. And you repeat the calculations until you can produce a result for all of these calculations that are set forth before you here in this chapter, until you can produce a result for the calculations in a reasonable productive rate or productive amount of time. Okay, so if at first solving this one with negative integers takes you 20 minutes and it was a good effort and a good go, that's fine. You have to work on it until you can produce results under 30 seconds or so. That's when you're done. When you reach proficiency in these calculations, that's when you covered lesson 1 from chapter 1. And that's when your work is about done on it, okay? You have to quote the terms and recall the definitions at sight and explain the terms and be able to perform all of these calculations unassisted without referring back to the book. Okay, and that's how basically the chapters go on that one. The same idea, just really briefly, is also can be found in this apprenticeship book. Same idea. So it's got a table of content up front. I just flipped the page. I just flipped the page over, but you can see the table of contents and the learning tasks in it. And this book has nice tabs, so you can find the lessons easier. Let's go to a batch of lessons here, the first one. And in this one, you have the learning outcomes clearly printed as well, and it's bulleted there. Some optional resources that can help you link the ideas in this chapter to other ideas throughout your apprenticeship. And the first lesson here starts with the definitions here, found probably in the headings. What's a fiber rope, or what's a manila rope? You can zoom in there. There, manila rope is light yellow in color and has a smooth, waxy surface. Manila rope is about 35% as strong as nylon and is available in 6 grades. And then you can read these grades here. So that's how the new terms are introduced and some definition is given. So loosely the same arrangement and the same structure as you can see it in a math textbook. And here another definition and the concept explained there, and the lesson keeps going on. And after a while you have here a set of exercises that you can do, a self-test that you can do, and of course, I forgot to mention, with the math book you have at the end, all the answers are at the end of the book. You can find all the answers here and all the new terms that were introduced in this glossary, and the answers can be found here. So you can check your answers as you go through all of the practice problems, and the answer key doesn't tell you how to get the answer, it just tells you what the final answer is, and often you can reverse engineer it just in case the sample calculations that are shown step by step within the chapter, if those don't help, maybe you can reverse engineer it from the answer key. That's why they include all the answers, and these answers have been meticulously pieced together. Same goes for this book. You have an answer key somewhere at the back there. Alas, it says answer key, and here are the answers for the self-test, for self-test 1 at the end of the first lesson, and then the second lesson gets going about knots and hitches, and when you're done with the second lesson you have another self-test. And come back to the front of the book here, where the chapter starts. At the beginning here in the learning outcomes you can see these 4 bulleted items, and there is 4 lessons in this book. So that was the first, and all lessons end with a self-test. So that's how this book also goes. And like I said, you have to read every single letter on every single page and do all of the exercises, and when you're done with all of the exercises, the practice problems, you're not done. You're just going to have to change the numbers and calculate again until you reach proficiency. Here, this one asks to identify this one knot. However, there is 9 knots to be identified in this chapter. Do you think you're done when you can identify just this one? Nobody, you're not. You're going to have to practice it until you can do all 9 at sight. And lastly, and just very briefly, the same works with this engineering textbook. The same principles apply. Let me see, here is some acknowledgements and whatever. Here is a table of contents. You can see the individual lessons in the chapters. Let's go to chapter 1, lesson 1, which starts here. This one says chapter objectives, same as learning outcomes. This is what you're going to be learning in this chapter, and this is where it starts. Instead of highlighting, the printing people used italicized letters. For example, that word there is in italics, or that expression there is in italics, and there's a glossary at the end of the book that you can look these up to find out what rigid body actually is. And some of these definitions are also in the book. For example, what's a particle? What's a rigid body? What's concentrated force? Alrighty, what is exactly meant by mass? versus weight. Okay, so here's key terms again, and you have a couple of sample calculations on these pages, and more sample calculations with more tables. And when you're done with those ones, here is some more detailed sample calculations, because those were okay. The previous ones were just equations, and this is the actual sample calculations. Sorry, my bad. Sample calculation, second page, and after that the practice problems. Okay, and in this one you have 21 practice problems, and you have to work your way throughout all 21 of them to have some learning take place. But you're not done when you get to practice problem 21. You change the numbers in all of these and you start over again until you reach a level of proficiency in these calculations, and you can get them done in a timely manner. And like I said before, you have to use these definitions throughout the chapter, and you have to quote the definition of these new terms at sight, okay? Because without them you won't be able to work with the terms and concepts of, sorry, that's the new chapter of this of these practice problems. So basically that's how to use a textbook, and that's about the amount of work that qualifies as effort. If you find yourself lacking, don't be surprised if you drop out. If you manage to keep passing, it is possible to keep passing a course with work less than what I just described, but you're not learning everything that's prescribed to be learned in the class. Okay? So keep that one in mind, and get back to